Hey, today we're making a delicious red velvet cake, so let's get started. To make this cake, you'll need eggs, salt, butter, cocoa powder, baking soda, a little sugar, buttermilk, vanilla, vinegar, red food coloring, all-purpose flour, cream cheese, and powdered sugar too. You want to prep your pans before you get started on the batter, so you can use baking spray and a little butter and either flour them or add cocoa powder just to dust them and make sure they release really easily. Now we're going to start that amazing batter into a large bowl. I'm adding 300 grams or 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. The nice thing about the scale is you can always take it away. I'm adding almost a teaspoon of kosher salt, and you go. As well as 1 teaspoon of baking soda. This is an A reaction with one of the ingredients later on. Our scale is done. We're going to give this a mix and just set it aside before we get our room temperature butter out into the bowl of my stand mixer. I'm adding a cup of butter. This is room temperature, but I'm going to give this a nice mix. Any kind of darker cake like red velvet is something you're going to notice clumps of unmixed nonsense in, so we want the butter to be really well creamed up. Now to that, I'm adding 150 grams or 1.5 cups of granulated sugar. Red velvet is a classic and delicious cake. It's one of my favorites because I love chocolate. I love cream cheese. It has the best of both worlds. Traditionally, it's a light chocolate cake. And I mean decades ago, it was a very light chocolate cake. There's buttermilk, cocoa powder, and vinegar in it. They have a reaction and you get a little light pinkish cake. It's dusty pink, very cute. But with the advent of photography and amping things up, it became a red velvet cake. Some versions don't have any chocolate in them, but I think this cake definitely needs a little kiss of chocolate. Now we're going to add the eggs one at a time. Let them incorporate in between. Mix that up until it's nice and smooth. And now we can drizzle in 2 teaspoons of iced vanilla. While that's mixing, I'm going to measure out 1 cup of buttermilk. And I'm mixing in a tablespoon of vinegar. The vinegar, of course, is an acid, and that's going to give our cake a huge lift. When the batter comes together, you're going to see the bubbles, and it's just going to be so light and dreamy. I'm pausing this to talk about the red situation. As I said, historically, red velvet cake was naturally a dusty pink from the chocolate. But we're going to amp it up with a little bit of food coloring. You can skip this, and I actually like to do it. A little bit of red food coloring for the batter, and then we're going to separate some batter, cook it as a cupcake, bake it as a cupcake, and that's going to get crumbled for the outside. So it looks really dramatic without adding all the food coloring. Let's give this a mix. That looks pretty red now. It'll become less red when we add the flour and mix it with the butter and everything else. I'm about to mix the cocoa powder into our light chocolate cake, but a word of caution. So we're using natural cocoa powder, not Dutch processed cocoa powder. Dutch processed cocoa powder has less acid in it, less acidic, which makes fudgy baked goods good for brownies. But for this cake, in theory, you want the acidity in the cocoa powder. I'm adding 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder. You could add in a little bit more if you want an extra chocolatey. I have very good friends with chocolate allergies. I'm mixing this in a bit before I add the 3rd tablespoon. Now we're going to mix cocoa powder in and get it really well mixed before we get into the next step. You always want to mix well until you add the flour. And once the flour is in, you're really mixing until combined. Because you don't want to activate the gluten in the flour and get a cake that is just kind of dense and gummy. You want to melt it in your mouth. I'm adding half of the dry mixture in right now. Mix that until it's almost combined. Add the wet mixture in half of it, the remaining dry, and the remaining wet red mixture looks like a science experiment. Okay, this is foaming up, so get that into your prepared pans, divide it up evenly, and I'm using 3 6-inches. You could use 2 8-inch pans. Both work fine. If you want 3 8-inch pans, double the recipe. I tried eyeballing, but it did not work out, so I popped them onto a scale and made sure they were all roughly equal. And cake strips are on, and these guys are ready to go into the oven for close to 35 minutes. You want to see that the edge is pulling away from the pan, and the center is springy when you touch it. My cakes are out of the oven, and as promised, alright, here's the deal. Wait for it to cool down just enough so it's touchable, and then tap it. They're giving it a lateral tap and it's breaking free of the bottom if it's at all stuck. So tap, 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 and I can even see my cake jump into the pan. Pop it out. It's nice and ready. Repeat for the other cake layers and set them aside to cool completely before we assemble them. While they're cooling, we're going to make the most amazing cream cheese frosting ever. It's so easy too. Into the bowl of your stand mixer fitted with a paddle attachment or a big bowl. If you're using a hand mixer, add 1 cup of butter. That's 226 grams, and it should be room temperature and preferably unsalted. Although you can use salted butter in this, just don't add any more salt. Now we're adding 2 8-ounce blocks of cream cheese, 452 grams. And by the way, the cream cheese in this instance doesn't have to be really liquid because cream cheese frosting is amazing and delicious, but it can be a little soft, which is frustrating. You don't want to add tons and tons of sugar to it to stabilize it because it's too sweet if you use it. Cooler cream cheese. It just has a little bit of a thicker consistency and your frosting will set up really nicely. We're going to mix this up for a few minutes until it's nice, creamy, and homogeneous. Once it's nice and mixed, we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla and a pinch of salt, unless you use salted butter. And now it's time to add the powdered sugar. 6 cups or 680 grams, and that's going to be added in a couple of batches. Don't all dump it all out. At the same time, there will be a sugar explosion. This isn't a frosting, by the way, to decorate a 3-layer 6-inch cake or 2-layer 8-inch cake really easily. Mix on low in a few batches. When you make frostings, you really don't want to beat on high. It's going to give you a lot of air bubbles, which is, in this instance, is not great for decorating. So low and slow is the way to go with frostings. And I wish you could smell these cakes with the frosting. It's pretty amazing. A couple of minutes of mixing on low and that's fine. We're going to build it carefully and then chill it. I'm ready to build. I like to make my cakes directly on a cake plate, but this one isn't getting transported. If you need to move it, get a cardboard round. A little bit of frosting on the bottom for glue, and we're going to center it now, build it up. Maybe half a cup of frosting in between each layer. That'll be about enough. This cake is really happy with the cream cheese frosting on it, so don't skip it. A lot of people get intimidated by layer cakes, and they are so easy. Let me know if you want a new video on all my cake decorating tips. If this started getting wobbly or something was going awry, the only thing you need to do is put a skewer through the middle and then just chill it up so it'll firm and fix itself. Heat is the enemy of cakes until they're fully built. Nice and tall and proud. I love a 3-layer cake. I'm doing a really simple but beautiful decoration scheme on this cake. Now we're going to go for some coverage all down the side. And here, if you have a turntable, you could definitely use that. I'm tempted to crumb coat this, and crumb coating just means that you're going to add a thin layer and chill it up before adding a final coat. But I think we can get away with not doing that. Well, it's going into the fridge for a minute, just until I get my piping bags. Fill UA's big piping bag with the frosting and you can pipe it onto the side, get some good coverage, and then smooth it out. Snip the tip off your piping bag, and now this is so much easier. So watch this. Just going to pipe along the edge, and I should have plenty of frosting left over for a little flourish on top. Cream cheese frosting is so delicious, but do not stress about getting it perfectly smooth. It's not that kind of frosting. Use a small knife and just to smooth the slide out a bit, little up and down. We're definitely going to have excess. That's fine. That's for the top. So now we're just going to give it more smooth. This can hang out in the fridge for a few minutes while we do something else. I reserved a little batter and baked 1 cupcake which is red. Had more red food coloring in it. Now you can crumble it up, or you can use a cheese grater and just grate it up to get little crumbs that we're going to decorate the side with. There we go. Lots of nice red crumbs to decorate our cake with. I plopped on an 846 tip. That's a large closed star, but you can use anything you'd like. And now I'm just going to decorate this with kind of a little scallop pattern. Just go back and forth and really try to get some height and definition, but not so much that it'll fall over. That'd be bad. So I'm pulling it off, then going back over, then pulling it off. Grab a handful of crumbs and we're just going to make a crummy skirt just like that. Lets people know what's inside the cake and gives it a little bit of extra contrast. Whenever you do a skirt, get some coverage on the base and then add a little bit on top, so it's kind of a gradient of the material. Yeah, that looks nice. Just a couple of extra pieces on top really make a huge difference. Your cake can be enjoyed right away or chilled. Make sure you keep it in the refrigerator if it's hanging out for a while. Melt in your mouth chocolate cake with that luscious cream cheese frosting. This is a must-make recipe. I hope you enjoyed, and if you like this video, check out my cake playlist.